Hello there. How are you guys doing today? I am super excited to be here and I'm super excited to teach you something about your brain today. So I am going to bring up my PowerPoint. I'm going to share it here. There we go. And I want to talk to you about your brain. If we were live, I'd be asking you, what do you already know about your brain? Most kids say it's a muscle. That is absolutely right. It is a muscle. Students say it helps me do everything. Exactly. So my goal, my hope is that through these videos, you can learn about your brain so that you can rewire your brain to do hard things. Okay, so let's get started. So our brain has an amygdala. It is a small little part. If you look at the screen, it's a small little part of our brain. And that is what causes and regulates all of our emotions. You know how you have some really hard emotions sometimes when you feel frustrated, when something's too hard, when you don't think like you can ever do it right, or you're not good enough. Well, guess what? You're not alone. Everyone feels this way because they have a human brain. So I want you to learn about your amygdala. And I want you to read this with me. My amygdala. This is my primitive brain. And I teach my students, it's this back part of the brain, right back here. That's where we point to. It is in the back of my brain. It does not think, it just reacts. This is the part of our brain that causes big reactions when we think things are too hard, too boring, too stressful, not fun, or when we think we're being distracted by other people. Like, I can't do that, Miss Grauer. It's too hard. I'm distracted. They're distracting me. Our amygdala sends this trigger into our brain that we need to do something about it. We need to act and react. We also feel this inside of our body when we think someone is being mean to us, somebody doesn't like us, or when something or someone is unfair. So kids ask me, how do you know when your amygdala is triggered? And I teach them that they can feel when their amygdala is being triggered by the sensations that they have in their body. When you have a sensation in your body, that means you've had an emotion. Because most kids, they don't know. Another thing that you don't know is that when your amygdala gets activated, it literally is wired to take your prefrontal cortex offline. You have been disconnected from the internet. Information is no longer coming through your prefrontal cortex. So our prefrontal cortex is still developing when you are a student or a kid. So you have to say, my prefrontal cortex is still developing. I have to teach it how to work. And that takes a lot of skill and practice when you're a kid. When you are a kid of any age, it even takes practice as an adult. Miss G still has a hard time using my prefrontal cortex because it is not on automatic. It is not a automatic response. I have to train it. So my prefrontal cortex and your prefrontal cortex, the human brain's prefrontal cortex, helps you make decisions and plan ahead. So right here, read it with me on the screen. My prefrontal cortex helps me make choices and helps me plan ahead. This is the part of our brain, it's called the higher brain, and it helps us think about our choices, think about what we want to do, how we want to react. But when our amygdala that's inside of our brain gets triggered, our primitive brain takes over and it takes our prefrontal cortex literally offline. If you want to look up and look at neuroscience, it will literally tell you that when your amygdala gets triggered, your higher brain goes offline. So then students are ask me, well, then what am I supposed to do? Pause. The moment you feel sensations in your body rising, pause. Your amygdala has been triggered. So I use these images from a website called Mindfulness and Bliss, I believe. It's for children learning about mindfulness. And I love the images that they have for talking about the brain to children. So I have borrowed it. These are not mine. And the Amy the amygdala comes from them. And I will put their website in the notes. But I like to teach my students using these visuals because they understand it. So I tell them, look at that gorilla. Her name is Amy, the amygdala. She's an overactive superhero, and that's what your amygdala is. It's overreactive to reactions. It feels like something is a big problem, and it feels like you need to react now. So every human brain, even our students' brain, even our children's brain, has a nervous response, a nervous system response. And it either is a flight, where that student or child wants to run away when there's a problem, or when it's stressed or any kind of uncomfortable emotion, or they want to fight. This could be physical, where a student just automatically is aggressive or has a physical response. But fight can also mean words, that they want to argue or negotiate or prove that they're right. And this is like an automatic response that the nervous system does. A student may also freeze, shut down, and not budge. One thing that we have to understand for our kids and our students, and for you students, for you to understand about yourself, is to know what your nervous response is. And when you're starting to engage in these nervous responses, that it's okay. It's part of the human brain. But if you find that you have a nervous response that fights physically, or flights, you run away or you elope from your class, these are all things that you have to recognize. Because right before you do that, we have to teach our body to pause. We have to teach our brain to pause. And the younger the kid, the younger you are, the harder it is for you to do that, because your prefrontal cortex has come offline. The ability to plan and make decisions on purpose has gone offline. So something that I teach my kids and I teach my colleagues is that we say, like, oh, I can tell your amygdala is activated. I can tell your amygdala is triggered. What can we do to help your amygdala? And then that really puts the focus back on the brain, and it takes it away from just the child. So often we take students' behaviors and make it mean something about them. But if we really make it about their brain, then they also have less judgment on themselves, and they can also learn strategies out of curiosity and out of compassion for themselves, instead of self-judgment and self-criticism or embarrassment. So teachers, when we want to teach our students about their nervous response system, and we want to teach them about their amygdala being activated, we want to make sure that we're doing it with care and compassion. Because most people, most humans, and most students, they do not want to engage in this. So our amygdala is activated. We need to stop and pause. Our amygdala used to be very helpful back in the cavemen and cavewomen days, back in our hunting days, because it is what stopped us from going towards danger. It is what stopped us from putting ourselves in harmful situations. But nowadays, as we've advanced and our technology's advanced, and most of the time we are safe, our brain and our amygdala now picks up any threats that they're literally in danger. So those threats are uncomfortable emotions of feeling rejected, unsuccessful, inefficient. For students, it's feeling bored, it's feeling stressed, it's feeling like they can't do something. These little things that we as adults think are so little, to their human brain and to their nervous response system, they literally think that it is a big deal. So we have to teach our students that it is okay to feel like it's a big deal. And then we have to teach them how to feel their emotions. So this is when I normally pause and I ask students, so what feelings are hard for you to feel? And just this last week, students told me that it's hard feeling like they will not score a goal in soccer when they get the ball and it's coming towards them and their brain tells them, I can't do it. You're not going to do it well. Students also said that I'm not feeling enough, when parents get upset at them, which we all do, and then they don't feel good enough. So their amygdala gets triggered and that student wanted to cry. Another student shared that their amygdala gets activated when it's math time because they have a brain that tells them they are not good at math. So us as teachers and us as parents need to ask children, what feelings are uncomfortable for you to have? Because it's not all the same for every student. And we need to ask them, what areas in school does your brain tell you that you're good at? And does your brain tell you that you're not good at, and why? We can really take that opportunity to dive deep. And I know most teachers, just like me, you're thinking, where do I have the time for this? In your morning meeting, you guys, have that be the topic of conversation. Ask them about their brain, teach them about their brain in their morning meeting. When you're teaching study skills, teach about the brain and how it works. Okay, now back to you kids. Look at this Amy, the overactive superhero. When you feel her being triggered, I want you to call for Tex. Who's Tex? Tex is Sheriff Tex right there. She's also from the website that I borrowed the images from, mindfulness and bliss, that I'll share in the comments. Help me, Tex. And that is how we're going to work on practicing getting our prefrontal cortex back online so that we can have the reactions that we want to have. We need to learn to pause and feel the sensations in our body. We need to ask ourselves, is this problem big or small? Ask yourself and ask your brain, what is the best action to take? Some students need to take a walk. Some students need a break. Some students need to learn to ask for help, and they need to know that it's okay and it's allowed and it's accepted. And it takes practice. This is not something that will happen overnight. It takes daily practice. It takes hourly practice. Really engaging your prefrontal cortex that is not fully developed for our kiddos takes practice. Calling for text is not a natural response, so you will have to practice. And practicing is okay. And when you fall back into your brain habits, it's okay. That's normal. But when we act in awareness, we can learn that, oh, yep, that's what my brain does when my amygdala is activated, but I'm going to pause and choose if that's how I want to react. We need to teach our students and our kids and ourselves not to hold judgment over ourselves when we have an instant reaction to something. That is literally the primitive brain inside of us. And even though adults have fully developed prefrontal cortexes, if they have not been in constant practice of using it, they also have big reactions, right? If you have not been consciously and actively engaging your prefrontal cortex, it is not working. It does not know how to work. It does not know how to function. So us as adults need to learn that as well. It is something that we all will have to practice. And students, this is huge. All brains are negative, not just yours. Our brains have a primitive response to be negative. But guess what? You can talk back to your brain. Our brain does not always give us the truth. Did you know that? I know, I couldn't believe it either. But our brain gives us evidence for thoughts that we believe. So if we believe we are not good at something, our brain will find evidence to prove it to be true. Students, if you think somebody doesn't like you, your brain will find evidence to prove it to be true. Teachers, if you think that a student is just misbehaving because of fill in the blank, your brain will find evidence to prove it to be true. So what I encourage everyone to do is ask their brain the opposite question. So if you feel like you're not good at math, ask your brain, what kind of math am I good at? If you feel like somebody doesn't like you, ask your brain, when have they done something that showed me that they liked me? And you'll be amazed at what your brain comes up with, because your brain comes up with things when we teach it to. The thoughts that we think and the thoughts that we think constantly become thought beliefs. And when we have thought beliefs, our brain is wired to look for evidence to prove it to be true. So if you think you're not good at something and you're constantly thinking that thought over and over and over again, your brain is going to give you evidence to prove it to be true, even when it's not true. Your brain is not always a reliable source. So you, using your prefrontal cortex, your higher brain, have to talk back to your brain. And you have to tell it a new story. And then it will look for evidence to prove that story to be true. And slowly you will see that you are getting better at something because you're not giving up. And that you're trying because your brain believes that you might be good at it. So I hope you guys all go and challenge your brain. Learn about your amygdala. Learn about your prefrontal cortex. How do you act when your amygdala is triggered? What strategies help you to engage your prefrontal cortex when it goes offline? Thank you all for joining me today, and I hope you have a great afternoon. And keep learning about your brain. Step into awareness.